Okay, welcome everyone to this Darwin Club webinar. It's a pleasure to have Ugo Pagano, who's a long-standing member of our club, to speak on divisions of labour, an evolutionary puzzle. Welcome, Ugo.
Okay, so I can start.
Yeah.
And well, today is also Darwin's birthday, so happy birthday, Darwin. And move, please. Move, yeah, okay. So what is the puzzle? The puzzle is about the division of labor. Why only so few species have a division of labor? And the questions are these ones. If cooperation and specialization offer evident evolutionary advantages, why did only a few species achieve them? Why did this characteristic emerge in such extremely different form of life? We share very few genes with social insects. And why many authors then, who wanted to make an analogy with human society, decided to use social insects. So why did Mandeville narrate a fable of bees and not a fable of chimps? Move. I will give immediately a short answer, and I will elaborate on that. The solution to this puzzle, I think, lies in the very extreme forms of life where we find a division of labor. There are basically two paths to the division of labor. One is a cognitive path. You develop a fairly large brain, and you are able to communicate, and thanks to a language, you can decide who does what and so on. This is the human path. The other path is that you do the opposite. You do not invest very much in your offspring. You produce many of them. Your cost is very low, and you can afford a lot of infertile children and specialize them. This is the other path. This is the genetic path to the division of labor. So we have two different paths. In between, and I will elaborate on that, you have what you may call the intermediate trap. And this intermediate trap, you cannot develop a division of labor. Why? Because on the one hand, you have not invested enough that you have sophisticated communication capabilities like humans, and still your cost of reproduction is sufficiently high that you cannot afford to have infertile children. And most species are in this trap in between. This is the idea. Move, please. Now, let's now go to the two logical division of labor. We have in economics two very different logical division of labor. One is Charles Babbage, who thought that you should have a division of labor because in this way you would have an optimal utilization of given skills. An entrepreneur, a master manufacturer, to use efficiently skills would basically try the division of labor so that some people who had sophisticated skills would specialize in that in a particular function, and other people could be employed in other functions, even if they were not sophisticated, because these functions were far simpler than the other ones. So in this way, using a system of comparative advantage, you could redistribute the people among different tasks and have an optimal utilization of given skills. The Smithian system was completely different. He thought that the reason why you had the division of labor is that if you were concentrating in one activity, you were learning by doing that activity much more than if you were doing many activities. And this specialization was made possible by market exchanges. This is something that we discussed also in the last seminar. So according to Babbage, the division of labor increases productivity by minimizing the learning required for doing. So before doing, you decide that you don't want to learn too much. Every people can learn only part of what is necessary to produce something, thanks to division of labor. And according to Smith, the division of labor increases productivity by maximizing the learning acquired by doing. According to Babbage, we should minimize the learning for the doing. According to Smith, we should maximizing the learning that we get from the doing. Move, please. Now, the way in which the division of labor in social linked sector has been explained is by referring to the Hamilton's rule. The Hamilton's rules says that we have a cooperative division of labor in each society because in this case, the condition that you see above is satisfied. So this condition is well known, is that the relatedness to somebody, the genetic relatedness of somebody, multiplied by the benefit that you give to somebody, should outweigh the cost of your action. So this is what is the Hamilton rule. If each selfish gene maximizes each fitness, some altruism toward close relative can emerge. Social insects share the same queen mother, so they are more strongly related than other species. This explains their altruism and cooperation, leading to a sophisticated division of labor. In short, children's altruism explains the division of labor existing in social insects. Move, please. Now, this idea has been criticized by Wilson. According to Wilson, in bees and ants society, only queens are transmitting their genes. The others are infertile. The altruism or selfishness of other members is therefore irrelevant. Moreover, altruism cannot really explain why cooperation, in the case of social insects, takes the complex form of a division of labor that involves the specialization of individuals in interdependent tasks. So we have a real puzzle. How did non-social insects like mosquitoes evolve into society which centralize production, specialize in fertile offspring, and a complex division of labor? Move, please. Now I briefly illustrate the rule that I have developed. It's a mathematical paper on the Journal of Biological Theory that's been published recently. And the idea here is that the selfishness of parents and not the altruism of children can explain helpers' infertility. Parents choose the combination of fertile and infertile offspring that maximizes their fitness. So which one is the condition now? The condition is that you see above is that S, that is the increase in parental reproductive capacity from an infertile child, must exceed his foregone fertility, because now he's infertile, multiplied by the child production cost. So this is the condition that you get if parents are trying to maximize their fitness and decide which one is the optimal mix between fertile and infertile children. What you get immediately from this condition is that species with low C, insects, are more likely to increase parental fitness through infertile specialization offspring than species with high C, using the condition that the SB must be greater than F naught multiplied by C. The lower is C, the more possible is to have these infertile children and specialize them. Move, please. So the optimal number of infertile offspring declines with the cost per offspring. Thus, only species with a low reproduction cost can afford a division of labor based on the specialization of infertile offspring. You see in this diagram that at a certain point there is a threshold, and the threshold is given by the condition that we have seen before. And given that threshold, at this point, we cannot have, for that cost, infertile children. Clearly, an elephant cannot afford to have infertile elephants that help other elephants because it's so costly to produce an elephant, and this would really decrease its fitness. Move, please. Now, how did this transition happen? Here I've been, no, the one before, please. Here I've been very much influenced by the work of an Indian scientist, Ravindra Gadkar, and we have studied wasps. Wasps are a very interesting society, and in a certain way, they can be regarded as a transition society. Why? Because wasps have mixed characteristics typical of a transition society. Some wasps reproduce individually, like non-social insects. Others join as workers in a common nest, ruled by queens specialized in their reproduction. In the queen's nest, workers remain potentially fertile and benefit from shared facilities like defense, the common nest, this warm, and so on. Workers can hide their own offspring in the queen's nest. Sometimes they try to smuggle some eggs there, and occasionally they can also organize coup d'etat. Now, what Gadkar was showing is that the wasps that were reproducing isolated were doing less well than the wasps that were cooperating in the nest. So there is a potential for transition in that society, which is a very interesting result achieved by Gadkar. Next, please. Now, given the situation in the case of the wasps, the queen's counter strategies relies on the production of unfertile offspring specialized in different functions. The queen clearly tries to increase her own fitness. She does not like that they smuggle eggs in the nest, and she tries to have mutation. I mean, the queens that have mutation, of course, do better than the others. And then in this way, you can have some transition going. And this mutation, genetically transmitted from queen to queen, is likely to spread. Nests adopting this strategy outcompete others by decreasing the cost of internal conflicts, capturing the gains of specialization. Now, which one is the key takeaway with the reference to the U curve that we have seen before? That not only low reproduction costs are necessary to have a division of labor, but also this widespread infertility and this form of centralization of the reproduction by the queen, as it happens in bees or ants. Please move. So let's go back to Smith and Babbage. How do they perform in the world of insects? Clearly, Smithian advantages play no important role. Learning by doing is negligible. The queen holds the complete genetic information needed to found a new community. No market exchange takes place. Babbage principle finds clear analogies, centralized planning, minimization of reproduction cost, and exploitation of comparative advantage. So, for instance, you will have that a big ant will be assigned to defense, even if it can carry stuff better than a small ant that, however, has a comparative advantage in other tasks. So you can see that Babbage principle more or less hold in this type of society. Please move. Now, why mammals cannot follow the insect route? In the case of mammals, sex consumes much energy. Many fights among males. Social insects dedicate very little energy to sex. Males are subordinate. Most fights among females. The reproduction output is completely different. Female insects produce an enormous number of offspring. Mammals, including humans, produce only few. And in the case of parental investment, mammals have great individual care for each child, whereas insects have large numbers of larvae, so that the per unit investment, not the total investment, of course, is very small. So which one is the key implication? The insect route to dole is to the division of labor is not available to mammals. And in fact, we will see that with the exception of humans, they fail to have a division of labor. Next, please. Now, let's start now with a common case. I'm referring here now to chimps, but I mean, most mammals really behave in the same way. If you cannot really have a division of labor in one of the two paths that we have seen, and you are competing for your fitness against others, then you will try to advertise very much your fertility. And this is what most mammals do. And there is a big overinvestment in fertility signals. You try to have fertility signals during the mating period that is stronger than the other females. And so chimps, like many species, have the characteristic that there is this very strong advertising. What matters is not simply to advertise, but to signal it with greater efficacy than other females. Female receptivity, smell, visual signs, and length of receptivity undergo a process of positional competition. Now, how do males react? Investing heavily in insemination capacities, investing little in body size and much in insemination capability. They also do not offer protection to offspring. For instance, male cats or dogs do not usually offer this protection, or in any case, very little. Also because they cannot identify which one are their children. And indeed, we could think of an alternative strategy. If females invest in a weak signal, then perhaps this signal is almost private. A male can be certain of paternity, and this will induce him to provide some care. Move, please. Now, this is the case, a very interesting case, and is the case of gorilla. And it's in a way a fairly exceptional case, and the gorilla society can be a bit regarded similarly to the wasp society as a possible transition society, and we will see why. Now, if the fertility signal is short and weak, males face lower monitoring cost. They can invest in exclusive access to female and protection of their offspring. Gorilla exemplify this minority strategy. Males make huge positional investment in body size to fight rivals. The strongest males control a large resource-rich territory. Females choose, a territory that is rich and controlled and protected by a silverback. And in this way, the gorilla gains an harem. But then within this harem, you have some fights that somehow are a bit similar to what happens in the wasp net. Because in this fight, the male dominates. A telling detail is that despite the arguments, male gorillas have sexual attributes that are very small, for instance, compared to chimps, but also to humans, and this is an efficient adaptation to human monopoly. Move, please. But what happens is that within this nest, there is conflict and cooperation. Again, like within this territory, there is conflict cooperation similar to the wasp nest. Gorilla females cooperate, but they can also use conflictual strategies like female wasps to attract more attention, in this case, than rival females. So the mechanism is, of course, completely different. The two fertility signals, behavior and color smell, can be disentangled and manipulated, pretending to be fertile outside the actual period. Now, when females start adopting this type of strategy and make the mechanical signal increasingly low and the seduction signal stronger and stronger, then this destroys the foundations for the harem. Monitoring costs become very high. You don't know which particular female you have to control. And the entire harem system may break down. Move to next, please.
Sure.
Now, when
will you open Friday and Monday?
That's a good question. I try every year and they say no.
one microphone is open, I think.
Yeah, it's crazy. This makes sense.
Could you close off your microphones, please? Thank you.
Okay. Now, the case of humans is characterized by a very negligible fertility signal. This is the case where this fertility signal has disappeared. A natural mechanical fertility signal opens the way to smaller armaments because you cannot easily control females, and eventually to monogamy. Long-term monitoring of females and sophisticated cooperation deals become necessary. Communicating trust and reciprocity is necessary for long-term relations and stimulates parental investment. This requires social skills and language capability far beyond birds' melodies or Gibbon's love singing. Communication capabilities and mutual respect of rights, the Smithian requisite for exchange and division of labor that we have already considered in the last seminar, are favored by this new type of positional competition. Move to next slide, please. Brian? Brian, can you move to next slide? Can you hear me?
I can hear you and see you perfectly. I've moved the next slide on. I'm looking at a slide saying the human exception. Is that the one?
Yeah, next one, please.
Next one.
Okay. Now, let's directly, since it's also his birthday, and I really feel that the Darwin Club should concentrate very much its attention on these statements by Darwin that no, the preceding one, you have gone forward. No, you must go back.
This one or back one?
Back two now. Back two, please. Back. Okay, here. So, no, why do you change?
I'm.
Well, thank you, but I don't understand what it is.
I think there's a latency.
Yeah.
I think there's a latency issue, Hugo. So, Hugo, so you see them slightly after I see them. So, is this the right slide? The weak gorilla strategy?
Okay, no, it's not. So,
forward.
You forward.
The gorilla's territory as a wasp's nest.
Forward.
Humans' negligible mechanical fertility signals.
Forward.
Darwin on humans and gibbons.
Yes, stop there.
Okay.
So let's quote now Darwin. And what Darwin says on language in this excellent book of on the descent of man really requires some attention. Some early progenitor of man probably first used his voice, producing true musical cadences that is singing, as do some of the gibbon apes at the present day. And we may conclude from a widely spread analogy that this power would have been especially exerted during the courtship of the sexes, would have expressed various emotions, such as love, jealousy, triumph, and would have served as a challenger to rivals. It is therefore probably that the imitation of musical cries by articulate sounds may have given rise to words expressive of various complex emotions. So Darwin, looks at gimbals.
Oh, thank you, sir.
You're welcome, sir.
The impassionate orator, bard, or musicians, when with these varied tones and cadences, he excites the strongest emotions of his hearers, little suspects that he uses the same means by which his half-human ancestor long ago aroused each other ardent patience during courtship and rivalry. Forward now, one. Now, which one is the human exception that we can consider using the word of both Adam Smith and Charles Darwin? Really, the idea is that we developed communication skills, language, and also respect for each other property through this bargaining between the sexes that emerged with this peculiar fertility system that characterizes humans. And I will argue that this explanation is based on sexual selection that is provided by Darwin, is basically the only one that I have found that satisfies two conditions. And the two conditions is that an explanation for the emergence of human capabilities should first of all hinge upon circumstances that rarely manifest in the evolutionary path of natural species. The rarity requirement. What is happening now? The explanation should rely on factors that presuppose the existence of human intellectual capabilities. It should not, because otherwise, basically, we are not being temporally consistency. We are explaining intellectual human capabilities by intellectual human capabilities. Move to next one, please. Now, the hidden fertility hypothesis meets these two prerequisites. First, rarity. The combination of concealed ovulation, prolonged and selective female receptivity, and an extensive mating period forms a unique set, potentially accounting for the development of a large brain, empathy, and hypercognition. The second one temporal consistency is also satisfied because changes in fertility system, variation in female signal intensity do not inherently require a large brain or high intelligence. This trait emergent as a consequence, not as a precondition. So move to the next one, please. Now let's see other hypotheses. Gintis has elaborated this hypothesis that lethal weaponry reduces the gap between strong and weak, diminishing the importance of male size and emphasizing communication skills. Physical dominance was replaced by political framework based on persuasion and motivation, because now, because of lethal weapons, the weak could basically kill the strong. Why this fails? Rarity is not satisfied. Many species with similar challenges evolve complex inhibitions against intraspecies use of lethal weaponry. Temporal consistency is not met. Extracorporeal weapons stemmed from superior intellectual capabilities. They cannot explain the onset of human hypercognition. Move to the next one, please. Sembols group selection hypothesis. According to Sembols, frequent intertribal wars drove the evolution of cooperative capabilities through group selection. Cultural diversity made early human groups relatively stable with limited gene flow. And so we had parochial altruism that evolved. Why it fails? Rarity is not satisfied. Group selection occurs in many species. It alone cannot explain why only humans it led to empathy and reciprocal intelligence. And temporal consistency is also not met, because the reason why these groups were fairly stable is because they were culturally differentiated. And this cultural differentiation, of course, required the culture, and so is already based on some embryonic human hypercognition. So we have human intelligence explaining a human intelligence. Go to the next one, please. Now, as to Dunbar social brain hypothesis that was also presented in this series, I must emphasize that basically it is again based on hidden fertility, or fertility plays a very, very important role. Why? Because Dunbar hypothesis says that the brain sizes increases with group size and the related need for social skills. But then, according to Dunbar, group size is limited by fertility signaling cost. Stretch for a large population creates a negative relationship between female numbers and fertility across mammals. So if you have got a very large group and many females are advertising, then only few of them can reproduce. And a lot of energy is dissipated in this advertising and fighting. In large groups, positional competition means that few males get male attention. The larger the group, the more females fail to reproduce. Now, why then humans can escape this trap and have much larger groups and interactions? Well, because conciliar duration ended the fertility signal struggle, enabling large groups and large brains. The social influx offer also an analogy. The queen's monopoly of fertility eliminates wasteful signaling. No fertility struggle takes place. Next, please. Now, we can say that there are two extreme routes to a complex division of labor. The best solution is not in between, as the Romans said. Social no, Romans say the opposite, but in this case, it does not stay in between. Social insects a la Babbage, minimum parental investment, outsourcing function to unfertile offspring, exploiting comparative advantage. Humans are Smith, maximum parental investment, maximizing learner capabilities for a large brain, learning to respect each other's rights. We can learn, developing a language by which you could assign some people to a task and other people to the others. In between, both evolutionary roads were blocked. Extreme minimum or maximum parental investments were not enough. A dramatic decrease in fertility signal was also necessary. Next slide, please. Now, and this is a figure that I have now from another paper that I am writing. And there is a model, and here you can see a figure from the model. And the probability of having a complex division of labor depends on the per unit cost of offspring. You have two possible pathways, one on the left, the genetic pathway, the other one, the cognitive pathways. And then you have an intermediate trap. What's happening? You are using the computer, Brian, but then we see what you do on the computer. Okay. So what you have is that in between, we have an intermediate trap. Now, why this trap is particularly strong and is very difficult to get out? Because there is a clear asymmetry. Once you have an intermediate reproduction cost, your optimal strategy is to advertise your fertility signal. You get a lot of positional competition, and your signal may go very quickly up. The signal is very sensitive when you are in this particular trap. By contrast, weakening the signal in both cases requires much more complicated processes. In the case of social insects, it requires that there is some long process by which a queen can evolve and gradually increase the number of infertile offspring. And of course, there will be some reaction by the others, and it's a very slow process. And the cognitive path is even more complicated. You know, only few species got a weak signal, and then the process by which this signal could become weaker and weaker is even more complicated. So the cognitive path is also very complicated. Whereas if you are in the center, you get the opposite. While the weakening of the signal is complicated and takes time, you immediately get a very strong signal in between. So this means that for many species, even if they meet the conditions for cost, which are extreme conditions, either very low cost or very high cost of reproduction or producing offspring, then they are blocked by the fact that the division of labor requires also this condition about signaling and sexual selection. So when reproductive costs are intermediate, the probability remains close to the baseline. Only when reproductive costs are extreme and fertility signaling is sufficiently low, you have that we have a complex division of labor. Because signaling increases readily in the intermediate region, but it's difficult to reduce, this region may function as an intermediate trap. Now, this in a way explains the puzzle, why the division of labor is the most successful strategy that we have in evolution. According to Wilson, there has been the social conquest of the world that has been done by social insects and humans, and still is so rare because most species are in this trap that you have in between. Next, please. Next slide, please. Now, social movements against the factory system claim that capitalism did violence to human nature. I may quote Marx, but many thinkers say that the better formed is product, the more deformed becomes the worker. That is a seemingly moralistic claim, but in a way it has some evolutionary support. Humans evolved a division of labor by developing learning capability. We may say that they did it through the Smithian route, yet many were later forced to organize according to the Babbage principle, which is the evolutionary path of social insects that is lying at the opposite extreme of life. Thank you, I am done.
Thank you very much, Ugo. That was absolutely fascinating. Congratulations on that article. It's really, really extremely interesting, and I suggest important too. Anyone like to raise any questions? Any hands up? Peter Merman.
Yes, Ugo, this was really fantastic. I agree. So it seems to me the entire argument hinges on signaling, right? Whether or not, and can you spell out a little bit more for the human species, right? How you envision, right, that you got to this scenario where then the females, it's, the ovulation and so forth is not. So presumably there were some species, right, on the way, right?
Yeah.
So can you spell this out a little bit? Because I think that's the signaling part seems to be the central argument. And I'm still trying to get my head around how this evolved, right? Yeah.
Sure. The idea is that the gorilla society is as unstable as the wasp society.
Okay.
Why? Because you have a weak signal, and you also start having a non-mechanical signal. Females are seductive, try to get the attention of the gorilla, pretending to be fertile, even if they are not. Okay. So each one of them may have an interest to decrease even further, the mechanical signal, and try to show that she's fertile all the time, so that she can get more attention in terms of protection and things like this, and care for the children from the silverback within the harem. Okay, so you get a dynamic then of a weakening of the signal. So let's put it this way. I mean, the dynamics is this one. If you are above a certain threshold and you cannot give certainty of paternity, but you can only attract male competition, then you have an incentive to make it stronger, stronger, and stronger. If you are below a certain threshold, then you have another attractor that is in fact the human attractor, where once the signal is weak and you are at beginning in an harem system, within the harem system there is competition among females and a tendency to make the signal, the mechanical signal, weaker, weaker, and weaker. Okay. But it's really an extreme possibility because the gorilla itself with a weak signal is really very rare.
Okay, and how do we get, so what I'm trying to figure out is as we are making the signal weaker, presumably I think what you're looking for is that males commit to protecting one female and the offspring of one female, right? I mean, that presumably is where we're trying to go, right?
Yeah, because if if this signal disappears, the only way in which you can have paternity is by monitoring all the time one single female. Okay.
Yeah.
Monitoring in the case of gorilla is very simple because until you have a mechanical signal, you know which one of the females you have to monitor for a very short period in the harem. Okay.
Yeah.
When all the signals go to zero, okay, you don't know which female you should monitor, and potentially, since the fertility signal is hidden, she could be fertile anytime, and so pair bonding becomes advantageous because while you look for another female, your female may be fertile and you don't know.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Roger.
Yeah, hi, thanks. This is of course awesome stuff. It's very important work indeed. But I'm struggling to understand sort of how smart humans had to be, or the human ancestors had to be, before complex division of labor kicks in. I mean, gorillas have a brain of about like 500 cubic centimeters, as I understand. And they don't have the sort of complex division of labor you're talking about. That's the platform from which the evolutionary movement happened, if I got you right. So like, how smart do we have to be before we turn our now enlarged brains into a complex division of labor? Do you have a beat on that yet?
No, I cannot tell you a precise time, but certainly the fact.
Well, forgive me if I interrupt.
The fact is that I would like to go back to the discussion that we had last time. I think that to have the division of labor, as Adam Smith said, you should have, well, first of all, a language, okay? And then you should have also some respect, for some form of property rights, with a minimum level of community enforcement. Now, you can argue that in this situation of monogamy, which is not a one-to-one relation in a group, but also there is some social control that you don't violate too much the rules of monogamy, there you start having some elementary respect for each other property rights. So in this situation, you can have exchange, and having exchange, then you can have the division of labor. This is exactly the Smithian process. So if you join Smith with Darwin, I think that you get it. And I think that this is the part of the Darwin contribution that somehow is not used as it should, because Darwin and Wallace had basically the same, they were co-founder of evolutionary theory. Then they got to this problem: how you have the descent of man. And Wallace said, well, we cannot explain it. Men are outside evolution. You need God, basically. And Darwin moved to sexual selection. And he said, it's not only that you need two things to reproduce. You have to deal with nature, but you must also mate. And a lot of characteristics, the most strange ones, like the peacock tail or whatsoever, depend on these internal dynamics of each species. And from these dynamics, you can have tax and subsidies. The peacock is basically paying a tax to be sexually attractive. Long tail, but he cannot escape predators. In our case, perhaps we were very lucky, because also this large brain, at the beginning, it was a tax, was making us better off in sexual competition. You could understand better social games in this situation of considered evolution and so on. But then to carry this big brain was perhaps a bit similar to carry a long peacock tail. So it was a tax. But once you learned how to communicate respect each other's rights, then you would have exchange and division of labor. And so in the end, what was a tax became a subsidy for a lot of other things. So that's what happened.
So, I mean, you're much more of a Smithian than I had already apprehended. Smith saying, of course, that it's our faculties of reason and speech that explain the division of labor. And so you're saying he nailed it.
Yeah, and you understand the last thing.
So Smith said it is our capacities of faculties of reason and speech that explain the division of labor.
Yeah.
And you're saying this is precisely correct. Smith does not need to be corrected in one jot or tittle. He got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. But I mean, so those are very late developments in the human clade.
Oh yes.
Right?
Yes. Certainly you needed first at the beginning. Perhaps they were just having groups of hunters. They were basically all doing this, so they were cooperating but without division of labor, and they were all doing the same thing, hunting like wolves at the beginning, but still they had some potential because they had a more sophisticated language because of this sexual selection mechanism and some respect for each other's rights given this monogamy in a social group. You see, what is very important, if you go back to Darwin and what he says about gibbons, you may say, well, why gibbons did not develop a division of labor of a brain? And the answer is very easy, is that gibbons have this long courtship, and of course this is helping the development of some of their capabilities, but they are not social animals, okay? So each couple of gibbons, they're strictly monogamic. So there is one is a very long thing that Darwin observed. There are very beautiful pages there. Then there is the male that is singing for hours. Okay.
Yeah.
And the female just listen. Then if she accepts, Darwin says, she suddenly starts singing, and they are perfectly synchronic. They sing together and they are together. From that moment on, they control a piece of territory, and they will never allow any other couple to go to that territory. So then there is a limit to the development. You cannot have in this situation respect really for each other's rights, social groups, language itself is only necessary to have a couple, but not to deal with social relations and so on. So there is a limit to that, So we had monogamic relations, but we were also social. And let me say that I did not mention it, but I don't mention it also because it's a problem that I have. Whenever I am in a big town, I try to go to a zoo and watch orangos, because orangos are a very fascinating case, because they also have got a fairly weak signal. Okay, so it's very interesting from this point of view. And there is some literature on orangos in which they observe that it's a rape society. Because really, in the wild, it is a rape society. There are claims in the literature that in fact it's efficient because the female resists quite a lot and allows only the strongest males, to mate. And so she has better genes in the end. And so this is...
Yeah.
So this is the mechanism. But this is in the wild, okay? And of course, because of concealed ovulation, and you meet only once in a time, you don't know about paternity, and it makes sense. But then the same couple of orangos, if you close the male and the female in a zoo, they are a very nice couple. So you see there the potential that once you've got concealed ovulation, the problem is that they never lived in groups. Why? And there is a reason. They need such an enormous intake of food that they cannot live in a group because they need all the vegetation around them. So once you give them the vegetation to them together, then they can develop different relations.
Dick Langwell.
I agree. This was fascinating, Ugo. This was really interesting. What occurred to me was, in the context of your hypothesis, if you think about where increased human cognitive capacity came from, I mean, it seems to me that would fit right in, because if you have the weak signal and you have to care for one partner, that means that you might, right, that if the human brain starts to become bigger, then you have offspring who require more care. And so if you want to reproduce, you have to supply that care, right? And that's a self-reinforcing process. Right. So that's kind of a positive feedback process. The more care you give, right, the more intelligence, the bigger the brain, and so the more care you have to give, right? And so I think that would fit right in with your hypothesis.
No, sure, it does. And there are many complementary adjustments. One other specific characteristics of human. It's not really specific because not only human females have, but also some species of whales have the same characteristic, and it's menopause. Many other animals do not have menopause. And if it makes sense, it's clearly a necessary adjustment, because the moment that because of the big brain, the delivery becomes so dangerous. And as you say, the children are dependent on you. If you have, for the first one, you clearly increase your fitness, by producing him. But each time that you get a new one, you have a chance of increasing your fitness. But if you die, all the other ones that are still dependent on you also die. So when you, at a certain point, there is an optimal cutoff point.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's interesting that the case that in which you get a similar situation of these big whales is also a situation where a big dependency and a very difficult delivery. So it's maybe that there is an, but also that is very, very exceptional, So humans are very exceptional from a physical point of view, even if you do not consider the brain. Or we must admit, females are very different. We are not very different from other animals. Males are.
Right. Anybody else? Roger again. Yeah.
Yeah, as long as I'm not sort of stealing time from anybody else. I guess I wonder how, Ugo, how your story, how technology fits into your story. One of the most characteristic features of the human species is this insane ramifying technology. Right? So, and that goes back pretty far in our history. So, how do you have a place for that yet in your thinking?
Well, once you start developing the division of labor, and then you get learning by doing and things like this, you also get development of technology. Yeah, once you start specialize, but also once you have a language, you can transmit, your know-how from one generation to another generation. The same language by which you seduce can also be used to transmit the knowledge from one generation to that. Accumulate knowledge, progress, and these are things that others cannot do.
But then the timeline, I think, becomes very important, because the technosphere goes back from before genus Homo, right, to these so-called Lomekwi 3 tools that have now been found around, what was it, about 2018, I guess, created apparently by Australopithecus afarensis. So that's before the genus Homo. That's 3.3 million years ago. And it seems like, and that Oldemont tools, of course, are maybe 2.8 million years, or maybe 2.5 or something
Yeah.
million years old. So how smart were we at that time? Australopithecus afarensis had a brain size of about maybe 550 cubic centimeters, so more or less the same order of magnitude as a gorilla, and yet they had these napped stone tools, or that seems to be the current best understanding. So I don't know how that fits into the story here.
Well, but maybe that they had the proto-language that was already a bit more developed than the one of gorillas.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And the respect for each other's rights and things like this, that was with a little bit of community enforcement. The problem is we really don't know. It's
Yeah, I don't think we have much of a beat at all on, I think we have a beat on the social structure for Homo erectus, for example, but not for Australopiths. No, as far as I know, we don't have much of a beat on that at all. Yeah. By the way, I'm trying to take my hand down, but I can't. So my hand is permanently stuck up. Don't worry about that. Sorry about that.
Okay, no problem, Roger. Jan Willem.
Yes, thank you, Ugo. That was really, really nice. I'm in absolute and total full agreement with you that we have neglected too much the sexual selection part of the Darwinian story. So for you to sort of put that center stage, I think is extremely important. I was also quite intrigued by the part of your talk where you sort of set up your explanation against Gintis and Bals. At the same time, and this is coming back to where Roger was going with some of his questions about timeline, I'm still struggling to see a little bit what exactly you are explaining and whether that is the same or whether it's actually something different from what's Gintis, but especially what Bals is trying to explain. And to pinpoint this, my question is really, are you talking about something that I completely buy, which is that there is something about the mating system of humans, or maybe of the the whole family of humans, including older species than Homo sapiens? But are you really saying there is something there that is a necessary condition for everything else to follow? Or are you claiming that it's this mating system and the story you told about it that is actually driving the increase of our brain? And that is actually the explanation for a division of labor and even for cooperation, which I think is what Samuel Bals is getting at. Are these three things the same? Is your story explaining all of them, or is it just giving a necessary precondition for a timeline that then follows, which is what Roger was on about, where these other things like an increased brain then follows, division of labor can follow, from that cooperative problems can follow, collective action problems. So can you say something about that?
Yes, we had a long discussion with Sam about this thing. I agree that group selection is important. And there is a lot of evidence that humans were fighting each other. And also as explanation of altruism, maybe that the fact that you got these fights and fairly stable groups increased altruism within the group, and at the same time the hate for other groups. In fact, Sam has a paper, The Coevolution of Hate and Love. But the problem is that then you should ask yourself why this is not happening, was not happening for other species. And of course, there is also some group selection in these species, but the arguments of biologists is that the gene flow among groups is so big that you cannot really get very strong group selection if you take chimps or other animals and so on. So why are humans facing a stronger pressure of group selection. And there, some would say cultural diversity. Okay, there is also cultural evolution. But you know, to have cultural diversity, you need the protoculture. And to have a protoculture, you already need to have a big brain.
Right.
Okay, so the sequence cannot be that you first have a group selection and then, you know, these characteristics. Okay.
So do you think that your explanation is an explanation of why our brain increased?
Yes. Yes. I think that once, you know, you had got this problem of having to play all these social games because of considered ovulation, our brain became like a peacock tail. And at the beginning, perhaps it was even a disadvantage in nature because you were really simply playing social games. But then, like the peacock, you had to carry these enormous things. It's terribly costly. I mean, if you look at the baby at the beginning, it's really weird, you know. When he's newborn, you know, it's really, later it becomes more equilibrated. But at the beginning, it's really a big head with something hanging from the head.
Sure,
And,
sure.
you know, it's completely dependent, you know. Another animal, after a few hours, can walk, escape, and so on. So can you believe how costly it must be in a situation where there were a lot of predators? So perhaps few survived. The ones who survived, however, were more clever when they were mating. And in these social groups, of course, there was, you know, there was monogamy, but not only monogamy. And the cleverest one were able to have their own woman and the other ones and things like this. And the more clever women were better at getting males that were really helping, and so on. So with the social brain, that is a situation, you know, with this type of, with the larger brain, you would do better. Okay. But at the beginning, it was very costly. The beginning, as I said, it was a tax. Then it became a subsidy for something else.
So that's close to what I think Dick Langlois was also suggesting, that there's like this precondition of, basically it's a social brain hypothesis, but it's much more focused on the mating game. Would that be fair to say that is what you're saying? And then
But the social brain hypothesis is a different thing. The social brain hypothesis, I don't know. For instance, there are clearly exceptions. For instance, gibbons should be completely stupid because the group size is so small. It's 2 individuals. Okay. But even if you want to take Dunbar hypothesis, that you become more clever because in a larger group, you know, that he has got this relation between the size of the group and the size of the brain, you know, and the capabilities, which may hold in many cases. But then the question is, what is limiting the group size? And you go back that it's fertility, also according to Dunbar. Okay, he says social life is stressful because everyone in a group tries to advertise for fertility, to mate, and the larger the group, the fewer are the ones that are able to mate, and the more stressful is this competition. So again, then by having concealed ovulation, you could afford having larger groups.
Clear. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, there's no more hands up. Hang on, is there one? No. I've got a question for you, Ugo. You say you in your diagram you said you've taken it from current work. So where are you taking this now in terms of your research? What can we look forward to?
Now, at the moment, I am trying to have a model explaining the probability of division of labor. Okay.
Okay.
Formalize that.
Okay.
Okay, so
Yeah.
and at the end there is this figure,
Okay. Well, that's
and
worthwhile. Yeah.
the idea is that you have got this trap in between, because once you get in this intermediate situation, you immediately increase the fertility signal, and then you stay in the trap. Even if you go to one extreme, you are not able to. So that's why what has to be explained, the puzzle is why this is the most successful strategy, so rare at the same time.
Yeah. Okay. Another question. You talk about gorillas sort of moving a little bit in the direction. Does this tell us anything or present a hypothesis about the human descent from a particular group of apes, primates?
No, I don't. Well, I don't know. In the case, in the other case, or I really have not any evidence. I think that there was a common progenitor, but really,
Yeah. Okay.
But in the case of wasps, there is, according to Gadakara, it's basically it was from early wasps that you got both ants and bees.
Okay.
So there is the evidence that it's a transition society on one side is fairly strong.
Okay.
In the case of humans, that can only be used as an example to say there is another situation with a weak signal, and you find these two different behaviors, so that potentially it may evolve,
Okay,
but
thank
it's
you.
not clear that that there is a line of evolution that maybe.
Great.
Or maybe.
Marian, you had your hand up. Marian, you need to.
Yes.
Yeah, great.
Besides the article mentioned, are you working on a book on this?
Yes, I am also trying to work on a book on that.
What kind of timeline do you have foreseen for that?
I don't know. It depends on so many things.
Well,
Daughters, grandsons, family.
Okay. I'm a social scientist who's also unusually published on sexual selection. So your whole thing just totally fascinated me. And I've never followed it up into the whole subject of human cognition, and human brains and so on. I've never connected these things at all. So I'm really looking forward to reading your full presentation of this, besides the article you mentioned that's been mentioned.
Okay, thank you.
Let's keep watching for it. But anyway, it's a great talk.
Thanks.
Roger again.
Yeah, just what can you? I don't know if this is even like a sort of a fair, legitimate question, but anyway, what can you say about what makes a division of labor complex versus simple, right? I don't know how much that even matters for your argument, but here we are. How is it that the human and certain insect societies have a complex division of labor? What makes it complex?
Well, let's put it in this way. You are right. For instance, if you compare agrarian and industrial society, there is an open debate on which one had the most complex division of labor. And it's an open debate, and it's quite fairly fascinating. But in this case, if you look really at the beginning, it's very simple, because if you like, there is a baseline division of labor that is shared by most species, that is the sexual division of labor, male and female. And then there are really few cases in which, individuals do different things, and specialize in different things, beyond that, it's, and that one,
wolves
one specializes in the fighting, one like in the case of ants, that there are really. So it's the problem is that almost all species are, from this point of view, at the baseline division of labor. Well, of course, you do different things when you are young, when you are old, when you are, if you are male or females, but that's all.
Yeah. Wolves have cooperative hunting, and there's a division of labor there, but they're not in very strict roles. You may have one role and one to hunt and another. So, it's a division of labor. I agree with you. It's not very complex, but yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ugo. Really fascinating. I mean, it reinforces the point that several people have mentioned about bringing the sexual selection story back in. I know Jan Willem has done a bit of work on that, and you've done a lot of work on it. But it's really important, and to understand how we got where we are, and to raise questions about the dynamics of human social evolution as well. So thanks very much. It's fascinating. Great talk. Sorry about the problems you had with the slideshow at the beginning, but we all saw it. And thank you for the comments. So thank
you very much. Ciao, Jeff. Ciao.
Wonderful stuff. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Ciao.
Bye.
Thank you.